Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying Israel would decide whether and how to respond to Iran's major air assault earlier this week, basically brushing off calls for restraint from close allies, including the United States. Israel vowing to respond to Iran's unprecedented attack, leaving the region bracing for further escalation after months of fighting in Gaza. Israel's allies have been urging Israel to hold back on any response to the attack that could spiral. The diplomatic pressure coming as Iran's president warns that even the tiniest invasion of its territory would bring a massive and harsh response. Joining us live this morning to further explain, Mr. Ken Gray, Senior Lecturer in Criminal Justice and Homeland Security at the University of New Haven. Good morning to you, Mr. Ken. Always a pleasure waking up with you here on Live Now.
Good morning, Jeane. Glad to be with you again.
So a lot of concern this morning from Israelis and from allies of Israel after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been very candid, and he says there will be a response. They're just trying to figure out what that response will be.
Yeah, the War Cabinet has already come up with a menu of possible targets. It's just deciding which one of the targets that they have put forth to strike at, and also when to do this. Passover starts on the 22nd here of April and extends to the April 30th, a Jewish holiday commemorating the release of the ancient Israelis from slavery in Egypt. And so this attack is likely to wait until after the end of Passover. But nonetheless, they are planning to strike. It's not a question of if, it's a question of where and when. And as you say, Iran has promised a retaliation for this retaliation, that even the slightest attack on them will be met with a retaliation that will be extremely painful. And so this is what we have going forward waiting for us, is more of this tit-for-tat exchange between Israel and Iran.
Absolutely. It's pretty much a wait and see at this point, as it is with all of these other conflicts. Taking a close look at the Israel-Hamas war, we've had some updates from Hezbollah as it relates to that front. Could you update the viewers, please, Mr. Ken?
So there has been continual exchange across the border there with Hezbollah. The Israelis have been attacking a few towns along the border in response to missile strikes, and consequently that continues to be an exchange that has been going on this entire conflict.
A lot of the Israelis coming together in Hostage Square on Saturdays and Sundays. We've seen that happen out in Tel Aviv. And as this conflict with Iran has kind of sparked, even though there was already conflicts, but I guess a spark to an already embering fire, if we want to say it that way, there is concern that with that the hostages being held in captivity by Hamas will kind of be forgotten about. But the Israeli government saying they will not stop until those hostages are back in their loved ones' arms. Have you heard any updates on that front?
So Qatar, who has been acting as the middleman with the negotiations between Hamas and the Israelis, they are apparently reassessing their role in this moderator role as these talks are ending up coming to a stalemate. And so Qatar may back out of being the moderator in this case. Recall that one of the comments that Hamas made before the exchange with Iran was that they may find it difficult to come up with 40 hostages. Either they are out of their control or they are dead. So that's a very disconcerting comment that was made in those negotiations at that time, is that the well-being of the hostages are a big question as to whether or not they are still even alive at this point.
Absolutely. I remember interviewing a family, and the daughter was saying the grandmother was taken from the home along with her mother, and her grandmother was on heart medication. Obviously, Hamas won't let them gather up those items so that they can be in good health while in captivity. So great point you're making there. And as we talk about Passover, many were wanting their loved ones returned by then, or at least a ceasefire agreement. Do you think there's any likelihood that will happen?
So as it is right now, it looks like the negotiations between Hamas and Israel has ground to a halt. They are both stuck on their positions, and so it is unlikely that any type of negotiated settlement will come out of this as far as the well-being of the hostages within the next couple of days. And so it's not likely to happen before Passover. Now, something that is likely to happen before Passover is the IDF is ready to move into Rafah. They are waiting for the green light to execute their plan that they've come up with. It's, according to the Israeli Broadcast Corporation, it's going to be a two-phase attack. First phase, taking control of the area, and then the second phase is to establish a camp outside to be able to separate Hamas from Palestinian civilians. And so this is something that is looming, about to occur, and this is information that is only a couple hours old.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. How will this Rafah invasion differ from the others? Because when the others were happening, several in that region were asking them to leave because they were saying that was the only refuge they were getting from this war.
Yeah, you remember that as Israel prepared to move into the northern part of Gaza, into Gaza City, they told the civilians to move south of the Gazi Wada, or the south of the Gaza River. And then as fighting started to shift down towards Khan Yunis in the middle part of the Gaza Strip, refugees were told to move even further south. And so we've got 1.2 million refugees, Palestinians, who are huddled against the fence down at the south end of Gaza Strip there in Rafah. And now there's no place to have them displaced to. And so that's how the difference is that in this particular case, the IDF will actually have to physically separate Hamas from the civilians and displace those people while making sure that Hamas members do not move with the group into this second cleared area. And so this is a much more difficult military action than what the previous ones were. You counted on civilians to be able to get out of the area. In this particular case, there's no place for them to run to. So that's going to require the Israeli Defense Force to separate Hamas from civilians and neutralize the Hamas members as they do that separation process. This is going to be ugly on both sides.
Mr. Ken, I want to get back to the conflict with Iran, if you don't mind. You know, the U.S. urging Israel not to retaliate. I want to ask you, what could be the ramifications with allies to Israel if they don't heed this warning? And also, I want to put that into perspective with those foreign aid bills that will be a topic today, as far as funding for Israel, Ukraine, and also other allies. Could you put all of that into perspective for us?
Absolutely. So Israel was able to withstand the attack by Iran because they had the assistance of the United States, the UK, the French, and the Jordanians allowed them to all do this over their airspace. And so it was the allies who reduced the number of missiles and drones that were getting into the Israeli airspace, making it possible for the Iron Dome and the Archer and the Arrow systems to take down these missiles. If Israel persists in conducting this retaliative strike, they may not have the allies to go with them in the event that they carry out this attack. Israel may be carrying this forward on their own. And that means that any response by Iran may not be supported by the allies again. And so this is a much more dangerous attack on the part of the Israelis. Not that the Israelis can't strike at will if they want to into Iran. It's the retaliation by Iran that would be the problem. Israel is looking at perhaps striking at some of the nuclear facilities inside Iran. Natanz, for instance, is the facility where uranium is enriched. That is a prime target for the Israelis to strike at, is to take away their capabilities. Weapons assembly locations would be another one, or storage sites. Another target that I've mentioned in the past, but is not on the ones that you see about nuclear sites, is Karg Island. the Iranians' main source of income has been selling oil primarily to the Chinese. And Kharg Island is sufficiently away from the mainland that Kharg Island is where the petroleum is being shipped out on shipping to China and elsewhere. And that is a prime target in its own. So I would not be surprised if Kharg Island was also on that target list.
Mr. Cannon, putting this into perspective with that foreign aid bill, we've seen and heard from several legislators in the coming days saying they don't even want to participate or help fund this because we need to protect our own borders. That's what they're saying. And I want to say, if Israel does not listen to allies, including the U.S., what's the likelihood that this foreign aid bill would be signed? Because obviously this is to provide, weapons and those type of items. But if a country doesn't listen and potentially puts U.S. military that are stationed in the Middle East at risk, that could be a conflict.
Timing is everything. This bill may get through both House and Senate before the end of Passover. In that case, the funding would be approved, and then the Israeli retaliative strike would occur. So as I say, timing is everything. But the United States does not have a pile of money in which we can go and get that money from and give it to to Israel, give it to the Ukraine, give it to Taiwan. Instead, we have to borrow money, and we're borrowing money to give money away. And so that's kind of a hard sell. Nonetheless, there seems to be support to fund this aid to foreign countries. And so one of the restrictions that has been proposed is to stop funding offensive weapons, only fund defensive weapons for Iran. For Israel.
Mr. Cannon, great perspective and expertise. Thank you so much for joining us this morning here on Live Now from Fox and setting the stage for what's going on right now. And as we look ahead later in the day for that foreign aid bill, is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
So, we're again at a critical time here. A lot of different things moving. I think that our focus will return over the next couple of days back to Rafah, over the IDF's activities there in Rafah. So stay tuned to that. That's going to be the next hotspot.
We'll definitely be keeping a close eye. Mr. Cannon, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Live Now. You enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.